Good evening. One aspect of history that has always been a passion of mine is public history. Rather than the nuance and regimen that is so common in academic history, public history aims to make history more refined and palatable for a more general audience. In their introductory work, Leon, Nix, and Shroom say that public history is about the effective communication of a single idea or message. I quote, if sparked by their own curiosity, adults who exercise control over their learning often continue their own exploration even after they leave the museum or walk away from an exhibit. Another passion of mine is Jamestown. I grew up in southeastern Virginia and currently live in the Richmond area. The area is historically dense, but Jamestown, to me, has always had a flair of wonder to it. I find the idea of stepping foot off a ship after 4 months at sea with just the supplies I brought with me and the trust that God is looking out for me exhilarating. This course allowed me an opportunity to meld both of my passions into one singular project that I am particularly excited about. I decided to make a website dedicated to Jamestown and the planting of the early Protestant church in Virginia. I call this website the Jamestown Revival because, at its heart, it seeks to confound the notion that Virginia was settled strictly for monetary purposes. Too often, it is Plymouth that takes the credit for bringing Protestantism to the New World. And though Jamestown was admittedly settled for a variety of reasons, attention to the soul of man was not ignored. So today, I'd like to give a brief tour of the main page of my website and provide a brief overview. Much of the site remains unfinished, and I won't post a link until Sunday, but I believe we can get a good feel about the direction the Jamestown Revival will take from the front page.
So, the Jamestown Revival will seek to provide a virtual tour of the planting of the Church of England from 1607 with the foundation of Jamestown to the Indian Uprising of 1622. This tour will act as a series of virtual museum exhibits and will divide into 5 separate and distinct websites. The idea is you enter here, and as you progress through the site, you get 5 distinct websites. So the first one is called A Prelude to Discovery, and that will focus on the role of the Church of England as a motivational force for the colonization of North America. We'll talk about the Reverend Richard Hakluyt, King James the first charter of the Virginia Company of London, and just basic background research that will act as a framework to discuss this westward expansion of the Protestant faith. The second page is called The Faith of the New World, and it will focus on the birth of the Church of England at Jamestown. With the foundation of Jamestown as a backdrop, this section will encapsulate the optimism of their first Reverend Robert Hunt and the creation of the first church, and the daily religious experience of the Virginia colonists. The third page is called Providence in the Darkness, and it will focus on the church as the colony recovers from the period of disease and starvation and violence from the native population known as the starving times. At this point, we'll talk about their second Reverend Richard Buck, and the resilience of Thomas Gates and Lord Delaware. Will highlight how the church was a constant force for the struggle. The fourth page is Virginia and the Great Commission, and will focus on the northward expansion of up the James River and the missionary work done with the Powhatan Indians. This section will focus on Alex Whitaker's work with the native population, particularly his conversion of Pocahontas. It will also focus on Sir Thomas Dale's establishment of Henricus as a framework of outward expansion. The final page will focus on the newly formed parishes up the James River and many lesser known ministers of the early Virginia colony. This part of the tour will focus on a sense of normalcy, but it will also sort of be offset by the impending threat of the Powhatan insurgency that will basically end the expansion. Besides the tour, if we go down, I'm going to try and do a blog. I'm going to do a book review, which I've already written, and I'm going to do. I've had a few current news articles that I'm going to focus on, and that will all be put in the interpreting Jamestown section. And then I'm using a section called Delving into Resources as sort of a bibliography, but it's also going to act as sort of a living annotated bibliography. So as new stuff comes to the forefront, it'll be put in there. And then one of the things that's important to me is this website right now focuses on the church as it was part of this course, but long term I want this to be about the whole experience, and I'm going to frame that around the Jamestown experience. And so it's going to be about the life of a colonist, and religion being a huge aspect of that is sort of encapsulated in this particular website. But it's sort of still a way for me to get my feet wet and see what works